Sarah, why don't you kick us off?
All right. So good morning and good afternoon and good evening. Welcome to our mid-session climate connection here. You may have seen some of our Friday morning updates during the legislative session before COVID hit. And since then, Chris and I have communicated a lot by Zoom, but we haven't been in the same place. So here we are virtually in the same place to give you an update on where we have gotten with our climate priorities. We want to give you a rundown of all of the important bills that we've been talking about right along this legislative session, let you know where they stand and how you can help us move them across the line. COVID has definitely given us a big pause in our aggressive progress that we made up until March, but we are still pretty hopeful about a number of our really important climate priorities. And I have to say, you know, Chris, you probably feel this too. I think it's because of the engagement of all of the Vermonters who came out to all of our legislative roadshow events and called and emailed their legislators that we were able to make the progress that we were. And I'm really getting the sense that there's a lot of folks out there are really understanding that that climate change is a catastrophe that we do not want to wreak on our environment or on our economy.
I would definitely back that up. The grassroots pressure has been excellent, made all the difference in the world, and also helped orient, you know, when the economy ground to a halt because of the stay-at-home order, it allows an opportunity for us to somewhat rebuild, and the invitation to do that in a better climate-friendly way is, you know, a great opportunity. And you saw that coming forward from legislative leaders who aren't necessarily always first and foremost in their mind with climate. So I do think that's encouraging, and it does speak to me to the very dramatic change we've seen in the public outcry around the climate crisis in the last year and a half. So thank you, everybody. I think we should just sort of tell everybody where we landed. You know, we talked a lot to folks who are presumably watching, our regular watchers, about 5 banner bills, and all is not lost on them. Not far from it, actually. We're quite proud to say that many of them have advanced. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's run through them, and then maybe we can share with folks what our crystal ball says is going to happen during our August, September timeframe.
Sure, our cloudy crystal ball.
Yeah.
So TCI, this is the Transportation Climate Initiative of 12 plus states. We were hoping to authorize Vermont to join that. The organization or the entity is pushing TCI. It's driven by governors across the region. They put the whole MOU on pause until after the election, until the fall. You know, you can rightly understand chief executives saying, wow, we're dealing with this pandemic. We're going to push pause there. I don't think we need to read into anything beyond that. But obviously that changed the legislative course of action since there was no MOU for us to be joining. Similarly, folks may know my bill S267. This was about the renewable energy standards, pushing Vermont to 100% renewable by 2030 and increasing the amount of diversified small in-state production. That did get out of Senate Finance. My committee was working its way through Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and then the pandemic hit. We all went home. That bill, I would guess, is finished for the year. We learned a lot. We opened a lot of eyes with that conversation, and I'm hoping, I personally learned a lot and understand some of the challenges, understand where some of the big utilities are coming from and the fight that they're going to make against us as we try to democratize energy production in Vermont and keep those dollars in our local economy. So a lot of lessons learned, some advancement, but I think it's fair to say we should admit that S267 is not likely to see the governor's desk in this session.
I really appreciate you talking about the the lessons learned in that, because I think that since we've had a trial run with it, we've heard some of what the detractors are saying about that bill. I think it's going to strengthen our ability to bring that forward again in the future. And I think it's really a no-brainer. We just need to figure out how to get over the hurdle of some of those big corporate objections and as you said, democratize our energy production.
Well, and one of the strategies that's come out of it is looking at the pandemic. You know, maybe we should focus some of our local renewable energy around making sure our hospitals, as an example, are resilient to power outages out of state or in Quebec in a way that could boost our local renewable generation. So the pandemic has been fascinating because for the first time in a long time, in my memory, Vermont is thinking about itself and sort of more acutely aware of what we're importing, whether it's food or toilet paper or electricity. So I do think there's opportunities for the future for us to have a great conversation and achieve those goals. It's just going to have to wait until at least January.
Yeah. Great. So let's talk about S220, which you all have now completed your work on, and it just landed in the House a couple of days before we took our summer recess.
Yeah.
So tell us where you got, and I'll tell you what our plan is.
Yeah. Folks may remember S220 had to do with Vermont workforce and making sure that they were on board and educated and perhaps pushing our climate goals. So folks like carpenters, realtors, real estate appraisers, HVAC and plumbers, electricians, all of these people intersect with thousands of Vermonters every day in our homes and have a unique role in helping us get more energy efficient. They also are all licensed by the state every 2 years. And so the idea was to pair the state licensure with at least education to say, hey, do you know about the incentives that utilities are offering for energy efficient investments, et cetera? And also in the case of real estate appraisers, helping them come up with a structure so that when you put solar panels on your roof, that's reflected in your home value. That has not been clearly done yet. That bill just passed the Senate virtually with no votes against, I think, S220. And it lands now. Here you go, Sarah. It's
Woo, thank you.
House Government Operations, where Sarah's the chair.
Yes. So Government Operations Committee has been preparing for this, you know, since early March, because we before the pandemic hit, we assumed that we would take possession of the bill in the middle or end of March, and we would be pushing it through, you know, before adjournment in May. And so we've done a little bit of work to prepare for it, but in addition to the work that my committee has done to understand what it means to ask our licensed professionals to help us achieve our energy goals, we've also talked with a group of Climate Solutions Caucus folks who really want to do some work in this summer interim, and you know, want to make sure that we have reached out to some of these professions, reached out to understand what new opportunities for licensure they have adopted, because what we're noticing during COVID is everybody has now figured out how to do remote learning, right? And so all of a sudden, it's that much easier for a licensed real estate appraiser to take an online course that might help them understand how to become green certified or get that little extra bit of education. And so even folks who typically work very hands-on and not in front of a computer, like our plumbers and our electricians, are also figuring out how to do this licensure virtually. And so we think it's going to be an opportunity for us to engage with them and say, look, you know, here's XYZ national certification for green buildings. How can we get to that quickly? And so we will be doing some of that prep work over the summer months in hopes that we'll move that bill when we get back into the legislature at the end of August. And we expect that session's only going to be 4 or 5 weeks long, so we're going to need to work really hard to move it quickly. and also work in concert with our Senate counterparts so that any changes the House makes to it, we can hopefully have a smooth sailing in the Senate.
That'd be great. And for folks watching, please understand, usually the legislature is finished by mid-May. So this is all very foreign to us as we're trying to understand the ongoing impact to the economy and to the health of Vermonters. And so the plus side, if you like, is we do have a little bit more time to try to push other important bills in the midst of addressing the pandemic. Let's talk about S337. That is sometimes called the All Fuels Efficiency Utility. This is the beginning and a modest step, but an important step of getting the expertise that's in Efficiency Vermont, which is now almost entirely dedicated to electric efficiency, and getting that expertise employed in transportation and energy efficiency, all fuels, fossil fuel efficiency. So it's a small carve out of their existing grant. And it's something like $2 million a year, but getting them to help us with weatherization, try to come up with strategies for transportation, et cetera. That came through the Senate maybe about 3-4 weeks ago, is over in the House. I'm not sure, honestly, of its progress there, but I do know that Chair Tim Briglin had suggested this was something he was very interested in.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see that bill advancing because I see it as a really important tool in helping Vermont achieve our energy goals in the long run. When we have an entity that is as well known and as effective as Efficiency Vermont, and asking them to help us with our fossil fuel efficiency as well as electric efficiency, that just, it's a tremendous opportunity, and I'm looking forward to seeing that bill advance. And the grand finale. So the excitement on the Global Warming Solutions Act, which of course started in the House and was passed over to the Senate before we even knew that the pandemic was going to upend our lives. And so it was passed over to the Senate, and it took a while for us to get through all of the real COVID response things that we needed to do before the Senate had the time to move that bill forward. So tell us what you did with it, and then we'll give folks a little call to action.
Sure. So just to remind folks, H688, the Global Warming Solutions Bill, this is a strategy for planning for Vermont to figure out how we're going to meet our Paris goals and beyond. It sets up a committee to create that plan, sets up a rule framework for us to move forward, and also gives an accountability measure where citizens of Vermont can hold lawmakers and the state accountable. This passed the House. What was the vote, Sarah? It was 105, something like that?
105 yes votes, which is fabulous.
Yeah, tripartisan. Yeah, really impressive vote over on the House side. Then we got it in the Senate, and the COVID crisis hit, and oh my gosh, we were finally able to, after dealing with the most acute pandemic responses, say to colleagues, look, this is a climate solutions planning. This is, what do we do? What do we want to do if the feds give us some stimulus dollars? What would we build for our green infrastructure, for instance? We ought to pass this now and get ready for this. In the end, it came out and passed the Senate with 24 out of 30 votes. And I was really excited. I knew it was going to pass, but such a strong bipartisan, tripartisan actually, vote really speaks well to the energy that Vermonters have brought to climate and brought to the State House in demanding climate solutions. So I'm very optimistic. Now we've sent it back to the House because we made little changes, and this is where you come in. We still need to fund this work. So we've set up the structure. Both sides have agreed to the structure, basically. And now we need to pay. It's not a lot of money, but it's like $500,000 or something to make sure that the structure operates and they have the expertise they need to come back to the state with a plan. And so that budget question will be a real question. We're in the middle of a budget crisis. Nobody denies that. We're just saying, look, of all the priorities, we need to be ready to try to meet the Paris goals and beyond. And that's where some grassroots pressure would help. Right, Sarah?
Yes, absolutely. This is an opportunity, I think, for everyone who did obviously such a great job of reaching out to all their House and Senate lawmakers and encourage them to support the policy as it made its way through. To reach out again, thank your legislator for supporting it and ask them to please vote in favor of funding this. Chris is talked very, very briefly about the challenges that we have before us in the budget, but when COVID shut down the entire economy with the stay home, stay safe order, that meant that revenues of the state really went precipitously down, and this budget conversation that we're going to have in August, September is going to be really challenging. And so we still believe that, as Chris said, this is a planning bill. This is a foundational bill that's going to help us make the write the plan and make the changes that we need to help Vermonters find more efficient ways of heating their homes and getting around from place to place. We really need to get this funding across the line so that we can be ready as our economy comes out of this COVID shutdown. We can be ready to find those places where we're tipping in favor of the renewable energy source, and we're investing in the technologies that will help us to be more energy efficient, to be able to use the energy that we can produce here in Vermont instead of importing $2 billion worth of fossil fuels every year. And so the call to action really is, anytime you are in contact with one of your House or Senate candidates in your district, anytime you get onto one of those virtual governor or lieutenant governor forums, or any of the other candidates, the treasurer, the auditor, the attorney general, we really hope that you will ask them if they support the Global Warming Solutions Act, and urge them to encourage its funding and its ultimate enactment, because this is going to be foundational to the work that we are able to do in the coming years.
Yeah, that's right. And we can't do it without the funding. So if you know they voted for the bill in the legislative races, you could say thanks and ask them directly, will you support the funding of the Global Warming Solutions Act so we can get it across the...
Yeah, and I think it would be a good idea to point folks to the Climate Solutions Caucus website at this point, because there is a listing of all the bills that we have just talked about, and you can jump up from there to the legislative webpage, where you can scroll down and see the detailed actions that the House and Senate took, and you can see whether your senator or representative voted in favor of the bill. And as Chris said, thank them if they did, because it's a very important piece of legislation. So we hope you'll visit our Climate Solutions Caucus website and stay on top of what we're doing. We wish that we could be out doing in-person events like we did with our roadshow last fall and early winter. But until then, we'll continue to try to keep you updated with video clips like this.
And thanks everybody for your support. And I just want to remind you, August 11th is an important primary for the whole state. So if you haven't already, you can request a mail ballot at the Secretary of State's website very easily, and be sure to participate. And if you have a contested primary, put those candidates through the ringer, ask them the hard questions. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sarah.
Have a good one.
And let's thank Bob, as always, for making this video possible. Thank you, Bob, the green guy.
Bob's been with us all along. Thank you, Bob. We appreciate you. And Chris, maybe I'll see you in person at some point in the next 3 or 4 months.
That'd be great. Take care, everybody.